I'm going to move over to an athlete that I do love. His jersey's hanging up right outside in my lounge here. Reggie Miller, all-time great pacer. He took a little sneak diss shot at Caitlin Clark, in my opinion, Scap. I want to get your ruling on this. But he compared her to Peyton Pritchard. And you know more about Peyton Pritchard than I do, but let's...
Words hung thick in the air, a striking accusation aimed squarely at Caitlin Clark. Reggie Miller, the legendary pacer, drew a comparison to Peyton Pritchard. On set, she held a forced smile, enduring what many instantly called an undeniable public slight. This wasn't praise, it was a deliberate jab that left viewers stunned, questioning how she didn't just walk away. The basketball world watched in disbelief as an icon appeared to undercut one of the most influential players in women's sports. The tension was electric. A shocking moment played out live, igniting outrage and confusion.
If that, Jason, I didn't know when I saw this on the rundown or on the little the sheet of rundown of what we were going to talk about. I didn't know that Caitlin, I didn't see the clip until just now. I didn't know she was on the set while that happened. That I would have just walked off. If I was Caitlin Clark, I would have just walked off at that point. Like Caitlin Clark is the Michael Jordan of the WNBA, at least in her importance to that league.
Steph
and then
Curry.
if you want to go to a specific comp, I would say just be safe and say Steph Curry. There are two, elite outs.
The insult landed instantly and without question. Peyton Pritchard. The hosts erupted, questioning if he even ranked among the NBA's top 60. This wasn't a slip, it was a deliberate strike from a respected former player. To equate Clark, who is single-handedly raising her entire league, with a role player felt intentionally belittling. The audacity of the comparison, with Clark standing right there, was staggering. It was a public rebuke, a moment that called for an explanation, but none came.
Known for her passing, led the league in assists as a rookie. Scap, I think it's obvious here. You know who Reggie Miller's big sister is? Cheryl. He took a shot on Cheryl's behalf. And I don't even know where Cheryl comes down on the Caitlin Clark deal, but I think that's what motivated Reggie is Caitlin's a bigger deal than my sister. She shouldn't be, so let me diminish her by comparing her to... It took all of his discipline not to say Jeremy Lin, because that's what he really wanted to say. She reminds me.
Imagine being Caitlin Clark, the transcendent talent commanding the spotlight, and hearing that live. The hosts watching immediately said they would have walked off. Clark's composed, polite smile spoke volumes about her professionalism, yet the underlying disrespect was undeniable. It showcased the immense pressure she endures, even from supposed legends of the game, and the quiet strength required to withstand public slights. Her calm reaction only magnified the audacity of the moment.
It took all of his discipline not to say Jeremy Lin, because that's what he really wanted to say. She reminds me a lot of Jeremy Lin, flash in the pan.
I think you're right. I think he probably would have liked to say that. And I like Reggie as a player, but he has been doing questionable things in the broadcast booth for years. This guy's been drooling and slobbering over LeBron James, like at every stretch and any opportunity that he gets. So I'm not the highest or the biggest fan of your guy, Reggie, in the booth. I liked him on the court. But again, another guy that really hasn't benefited from picking up the microphone.
The clear, respectful comparisons for Clark were obvious to everyone. Why not Steph Curry? Both are elite perimeter shooters, constantly moving without the ball, and smaller players who redefine their games. The parallels are striking, from their March Madness breakthroughs to their immense marketability. Instead, Miller picked someone entirely incomparable, making the choice feel deliberate and less about basketball insight. The disconnect was so glaring that even fellow panelists, like Carmelo Anthony, pointed to Luka Doncic as a more fitting comparison.
Up with Peyton Pritchard. I mean, first of all, you're a broadcaster, and you've made most of your audience go, well, man, I got to go to Google and find out who Peyton Pritchard is. Because it's just not, you didn't compare to James Harden or Dame Lillard or, any of these guys with big brands. Peyton Pritchard. People had to go to Google to find, and he did the race thing, compared it to a white guy. This is just bad, Reggie. Reggie, we've seen a lot of athletes apologize for things they shouldn't apologize for. Reggie should apologize.
Peyton Pritchard, as quickly noted, was a bench player until this season, only stepping into a starting role because of injuries. The Celtics had even dismantled key pieces of their 2024 championship core, giving Pritchard the chance he never otherwise would have had. To liken Clark, a generational talent, to someone who only recently became a starter out of necessity exposed just how weak Miller's comparison was. It cemented the sense that this wasn't about basketball skill at all, but something else entirely.
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to say this. I'm going to take a little cheap shot at Reggie, and Reggie, you forced me into it. If we were off camera and I was speculating about, I'd first say he's taking a cheap shot for Cheryl, and then I would go like, man, Reggie has shown a lack of discipline as it relates to his lust. He got jammed up stalking some married woman that like flew a sign, or her husband I think flew a sign, and I'm just like, oh, did he make a pass? Did he flirt with Caitlin Clark and she shut him down, and now he's taking a little shot?
The numbers made the perceived slight impossible to ignore. Pritchard, even as a starter, was averaging under 17 points per game, a figure that, in today's high-scoring NBA, is the equivalent of an 8 or 9-point average from the early 2000s or 90s. This statistical context crushed any pretense that Miller's comparison was harmless. It was a deliberate dig, an unmistakable shot aimed at undermining Clark's extraordinary impact and dominance. With every detail, the intent behind the remark became clearer.
Discussed the post-game comments with the referee. I know everybody was like, oh man, why'd you mention being a black man in America? Well, the reason I mentioned being a black man in America because black people in America has suffered more than anyone. Black people in America has been mistreated more than anyone. Black people in America has been marginalized more than anyone. Black people in America has been dealt a bad hand since the beginning of time. And so the reason I spoke about being a black man in America is because...
A provocative theory emerged about Miller's true motivation, a subtle strike on behalf of his sister, Cheryl Miller. Some speculated that Reggie might see Caitlin Clark's unprecedented fame as overshadowing Cheryl's legendary WNBA career. By downplaying Clark, he may have been trying, intentionally or not, to elevate his sister, even if Cheryl had no grievance. It suggested a deeper, almost familial rivalry playing out publicly, adding another layer of complexity to the apparent insult.
Nobody in the history of the world has been as mistreated as black people. Guy sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars for playing a game of basketball. He can't conjugate subject and verb. Black people. He's an ignoramus that is tall and can play basketball, and he gets to say this kind of stuff. Anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just a totally and utterly tone-deaf take by him. It's not surprising, Jason. I don't understand why he even puts himself in these situations.
Some even suggested Miller had to consciously restrain himself from comparing Clark to Jeremy Lin, a far sharper, borderline offensive comparison implying a flash-in-the-pan status. The implication was that even the Pritchard comparison was a watered-down version of his true intent, to undermine Clark rather than provide genuine analysis. This theory painted the moment as far more troubling. It wasn't an isolated incident for Miller. Painlists have long noted questionable moments in his broadcast career, including what they described as excessive adulation of LeBron James at every opportunity. That history casts doubt on his credibility, suggesting his public commentary may often reflect personal bias rather than objective insight. His choice of Peyton Pritchard was widely seen as both calculated and perplexing. As a broadcaster, Miller should prioritize clarity and relatability, yet this comparison forced viewers to research the player instead of immediately understanding the point, highlighting a disconnect between his intent and effective communication. The deliberate choice of obscurity, selecting a lesser-known player instead of a well-known star, made the jab feel targeted and intentionally confusing, layering the comment with controversy. Some perceived a subtle racial undertone, noting that Miller compared Clark, a white player, to another white player, Peyton Pritchard. In a sports landscape where race often shapes comparisons and narratives, this choice amplified the impact of the dig, making it harder to dismiss as casual commentary. Given the backlash, many called for a public apology from Reggie Miller, viewing his remarks as a misstep for a legend whose name is tied to Indiana basketball. Clark's team, representing the current peak of women's basketball, made the slight feel like a betrayal of both legacy and fanbase. Observers repeatedly highlighted the obvious comparison to Steph Curry. Both exploded onto the national scene during March Madness, became elite shooters, revolutionized their leagues, and captured massive fan engagement, yet Miller ignored it entirely. Even hosts expressed disbelief that a seasoned basketball mind would miss such a clear parallel, making the Pritchard comparison appear not just misguided, but intentionally provocative. Speculation arose about an even darker, more audacious motive behind Miller's comment, fueling the controversy further. It was speculated that Reggie, with a history of controversial behavior, might have flirted with Caitlin Clark off camera, and if she rebuffed him, the Peyton Pritchard comparison could have been a petty retaliatory shot, a personal vendetta masked as analysis. This on-air dig was then tied to a broader issue with professional athletes misusing media platforms. Much like Draymond Green's recent controversial statements, it highlighted a troubling pattern: wealthy, privileged athletes making tone-deaf, ill-considered comments that alienate fans and expose a lack of self-awareness. Green's defense of his on-court actions, claiming a referee put a hand in his face and citing his experiences as a black man in America, was immediately debunked by video evidence and widely condemned. Hosts criticized his "woe is me" narrative, pointing out the irony of a multimillionaire portraying himself as a victim and noting his frequent missteps in public discourse, especially on podcasts. His history with court issues only made the victimhood narrative more unbelievable. This problem isn't limited to Green. It extends to other pampered, extraordinarily wealthy figures, entertainers, athletes like LeBron James, or Grammy performers, who, having been multimillionaires for most of their adult lives, often appear completely detached from reality and the audiences they address. Their attempts to deliver profound social messages, despite being far removed from the struggles they claim to represent, fall on deaf ears. Rather than inspire, their commentary alienates casual observers and fans. The consensus is clear. Nobody cares what Draymond, Grammy singers, or pop stars say because their wealth and privilege shield them from the very issues they claim to champion, rendering their words hollow. This gap between lived experience and public pronouncements fuels cynicism and disengagement, and their moralizing only pushes the audience further away. Ultimately, both Reggie Miller's calculated dig at Caitlin Clark and Draymond Green's self-serving, tone-deaf statements reveal a troubling pattern among professional athletes. Public platforms, instead of adding insight, strip away mystique and expose ignorance. This constant stream of ill-considered commentary from out-of-touch millionaires damages their public image and undermines respect for professional black athletes, resulting in a significant and hard-to-recover loss of fan goodwill.